This is John Jackson Miller. I am the founder and curator of Comichron.com, the world's largest public database of comic book sales figures, here with the sales charts for February 2019. These charts, as usual, are derived from information provided by Diamond Comic Distributors, and then we do some of the analysis of our own to come up with some numbers for what the individual comics sold and what the market moved overall. This particular report is a couple of weeks late in being posted due to some other obligations I had, but in a sense there also wasn't a lot of urgency to it because the watchword for the charts this time of year has always tended to be ignore February. Ignore February is not simply what I would say that we should do with regard to the sales. In fact, every month is important in terms of what it might actually mean for the market overall. Where ignore February comes in is it's kind of what the publishers do. It is the shortest month of the year. Also, the fact that it's the month of the year with some of the worst weather. The upper Midwest had near record levels of snowfall this February. Publishers expect that there's not going to be a lot of traffic in stores, so they tend not to release a lot of important comics or launch any major series. So this is why for many years we used to call the first quarter of the year the dead quarter. Except for the very rare occasions when February 29th is a Wednesday, February usually has just 4 shipping weeks. Which makes it one of the smaller months of the year already. But then also because it's just 28 days, it captures fewer days worth of reorders, which retailers might be placing at any given time. So there's just less time for sales to happen. And even though we have 4-week months throughout the year, we'll have them in the summer, we'll have them in the fall, of course. Those months tend to have a lot more comic shipping in them, and certainly it's the case that there are more dollars worth being moved through the market in those months. And this is one of the reasons that we've said, for many years that it's not just February, but the whole first quarter. A weak first quarter can be erased by a mildly good month of May or a mildly good month of June. The volumes involved are just significantly different. And, let's take a look at, how much different the volumes are this time, because it is a much lighter February than we have seen. We see that 389 comic books came out, 304 graphic novels. That 389 comics, that is the lowest figure that we have seen for a month in the comics industry since Diamond began reporting the number of comics shipped in this sort of new release chart that it does back in July of 2013. There are almost certainly months before that with fewer new comics out, but this is a new record low just within this 6-year period. DC published 1/3 fewer comics than it published in February of 2018. Image also published 1/3 fewer comics than it did in that month. Marvel's published slightly more comics than it did in February 2018. You may have read that DC's strategy for this year has been to sort of pare back the number of comics that it offers, sort of removing some of the lower tier sellers and focusing attention on the higher profile books. And selling more copies per title if they can. This seems to have worked out for them because even though they put out 1/3 fewer comics this February versus the previous February, their sales in terms of overall dollars were only off about 15%. So that's less than half of what you would expect by the amount that they cut the line back. Image, likewise, sort of a similar figure there, where their sales did not decline anywhere near close to the number of comics that they just didn't ship in the month of February. So it is a strategy. Of course, Marvel, by shipping slightly more comics, we find that in the month of February of 2019, their sales were up 9%. This is sort of the challenge with trying not to produce as many comics, is that everybody isn't doing it at the same time. We have various publishers pursuing different tactics at the same time, and we'll just see how it works going forward. Looking at the comparatives, we see that it's no surprise February's sales were significantly off from January 2019. January had a fifth week, so that's not a big surprise there. And then also, January had a whole lot of extra comics in it because December didn't even really have 4 weeks. It had 3 and maybe a third, considering the way the holiday shook out, and the fact that the Christmas week was only a week in which just a handful of titles came out from the major publishers, that Diamond wanted them to focus on in that particular month. So we won't dwell too much on this particular chart. We'll look more at February versus February year to year, and we see that total comics and graphic novel sales were down about 5.25%, and comics were down 6%, graphic novels down 3%. Again, the number of comics that were in the system was significantly lower than the previous February, lower by quite a lot more than just 8% in units. So this is again a case where the comics that did come out did slightly better than they would have per capita, if you want to call it that, in 2018. This is also an interesting month because just a statistical fluke here. Comics unit sales and graphics novel unit sales were both down exactly the same amount, 8.47%. Now, when we look at the year to date, we will see that, again, thanks to that January being such a good month, we'll see that total comics and graphic novel sales for the year to date through the end of February are still up almost 5%, and that's both in comics dollars and in graphic novel dollars, both up about 5%, and toys are up about 27.83%. Moving on to the market shares, we'll see an impact of so many fewer titles coming out. Marvel is at 40% dollar share, DC close to 29%, Image 9.5%, then Dark Horse, Dynamite, IDW, Boom, and Viz. But now we get St. Martin's Press, and this is a publisher that we don't normally see this high in the charts, but there just aren't as many comics coming out from the larger publishers in the month. So they're able to make the chart this month. I believe it is the first time they've made the top 10, and then Oni is in 10th place. Moving on to the top-selling comics and graphic novels, we'll see that the number one comic book in units and dollars this month was Batman Who Laughs number 3. This is the third consecutive month that it has topped the charts, and this will be the last month that it will, because almost certainly we're going to see Detective 1000 as the top-selling comic book of March. Looking at the whole list, we can see that Batman Who Laughs was followed by the 2 regular issues of Batman in the month, the latest issue of Venom, and then Heroes in Crisis number 6. Because of when this video is being recorded, we actually have the sales figures, and the estimates are on Comichron.com on our February 2019 page. But you can see what these are, and these are the number of comics that sold to retailers in comic shops in North America. These are the ones that shipped during the calendar month. Moving on to the rest of the top 10, we'll see that Amazing Spider-Man 15 is number 6, Uncanny X-Men 12 is number 7, Flash 64 was number 8, Uncanny X-Men 11 was number 9, and Avengers No Road Home was our first issue to appear on the chart in 10th place. Again, no number ones, no first issues, no premieres in the top 9. This is, again, publishers ignoring February. And DC in particular is getting everybody warmed up for March, which has that 1000th issue of Detective Comics. The list for dollar sales is slightly different because Uncanny X-Men 11 leaps up the chart because it's a $7.99 comic book. Moving on to graphic novels, we'll see that the number one graphic novel in both units and dollars was Mr. Miracle by Tom King. Moving to the rest of the list, we see that it's followed by Spider-Geddon, Infinity Wars, Immortal Hulk Volume 2, My Hero Academia, Deadpool's Secret Agent Deadpool, Man-Eaters, Infinity Gauntlet the Deluxe Edition, Captain America Volume 1, and Amazing Spider-Man by Nick Spencer Volume 2. That's the units list. The dollars list, of course, has a lot of the higher ticket items on it because this is figured based on what retailers paid to Diamond. So Mr. Miracle is still number one, but now number two is He-Man and the Masters of the Universe Omnibus, Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, A Hero is Born Omnibus, Venomnibus or Venomnibus, I don't know how that's pronounced. Whatever it is, it's $125 and it's number 4. And then we have Infinity Wars and several other titles rounding out the top 10. So that's a quick look at February. If you want to see the sales figures for the individual titles, you can go to Comichron.com and just go to the monthly comic sales page and then click on February 2019. And you will see the information for that, as well as any information that we've got already for March and April based on reorders. And until next time, this is John Jackson Miller, and I will see you in the comic shop.